What's up, BC Boom family? It's Gerlisa here, and all month we've been talking about friendship. Friendship and community are essential to our life because these are the people that are around you that contribute to the decisions that you make. A mentor of mine would always tell me that there are people in your life for a lifetime, and then there's people in your life that are seasonal. And knowing the difference helps you to deal with each relationship well. And so, as you grow, as you learn, as you develop, there will always be people in and out of your life that were there just for a season, just for a moment, just for a period of time. And that is okay. It is okay to have friendships that phase out and that move and that transition into something else. And sometimes we think that those seasonal people are there for a lifetime, and shifting our mindset to understanding that no, this was just a moment, it can be a hard pill to swallow, and that's okay. Our ministry partners are going to dive deeper into this topic, and they're going to teach you how to transition well out of a seasonal friendship. Stay tuned.
Friendships change. We see this happen in TV shows, movies, music groups, influencers, and even in sports. For example, two of the most well-known sports franchises in history, the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees, they actually had the same player on their team at different times. This player is probably one of the most well-known, iconic athletes of all time. His name is Babe Ruth. See, Babe Ruth originally played for the Boston Red Sox, and even if you don't know a ton about baseball, chances are you might know that the Red Sox and the Yankees, well, they're like bitter rivals. So Babe Ruth played for the Red Sox until he decided to switch teams and be a Yankee. What you probably know is that Babe Ruth is the most famous, iconic Yankee of all time. In fact, a lot of people would say he's the one who changed that franchise. He's the one who made the Yankees one of the most noticeable and recognizable franchises in all of sports. See, sometimes things change. And in this series, we're talking about how to friend. But what do we do when, like Babe Ruth, he decided it was time to let go of the Red Sox and jump onto the Yankees? What do we do when it's time to unfriend? How do we handle it when friendships drift apart or they tend to move in different directions? Sometimes change in a friendship, it isn't over big reasons or a big deal. Maybe it was something like changing schools, which made it more difficult to stay in touch. Or maybe schedules changed and now you don't see each other as much. Maybe you've both changed interest, which means you have less in common. Changes like this are difficult, but eventually they get easier to cope with because they make sense. You have a reason that you can explain to your mom when she asks, how come you don't talk about or hang out with blank, whoever, as much anymore? See, sometimes the separation, it's easy. It's not a big deal. Everybody gets it and understands, kind of like a simple knot. I mean, you can pull it and it quickly and easily comes undone. But sometimes it's not so simple. There are a lot of different emotions involved. There's a lot of history. The knot is a little bit more complicated. I mean, there's memories there, and it's difficult to figure out just how to separate it. It doesn't work the same way. Sometimes, however, the reasons aren't so cut and dry. For example, maybe you and a friend had a difference of opinions about something that you both feel strongly about. You care about each other, but neither one of you is willing to change. So what happened? Well, the friendship changed instead. Or maybe you had a friend who hurt you with their words or actions, and it's something that you just can't move on from. Or maybe you're the one who hurt them with your words or actions. What happens then? Friendship changed. Maybe you had a friend that started walking a different path, one that you don't think is good for them or for you. You can't be around them when they're making decisions like that. Or it's too much temptation for you to make the same decisions they're making. So you have to make a change to the friendship until something changes in their life. Maybe you've experienced this before. Maybe you were the one who initiated the change and it was difficult. You were frustrated and mad at them and they didn't understand why you drifted apart. Or maybe you were on the other end. Someone quit making an effort with you. And maybe you understood the reason, or maybe you had no clue why they stopped talking to you, and you were hurt. You felt like you didn't get closure or an explanation. It just felt like rejection. And maybe that's exactly what it was. Look, wherever you find yourself right now, The reality is, many friendships only last for a season. If you talk to any adults, they can tell you that how many friendships that they've had that were simply for a season. Sure, some of them may last a lifetime, but that's rare. It's far more likely we will experience friendships that drift or break apart at times. Friendships have the potential to change, for better or for worse. It's a realistic part of life that happens, and sometimes it's the best thing that can happen for ourselves and our relationships. So how do we friend through a transition? How do we walk away and handle it well? How do we carry ourselves in a mature way even when our feelings are hurt and our emotions are involved? Well, let's talk about it. See, in the New Testament, the second part of the Bible, the first 4 books are the accounts of Jesus' life when he lived on earth. After Jesus no longer walked the earth, the book of Acts tells us the story about what happened next. It was the first page in the history of the church. We're gathered in church today because of what ordinary men and women started back then, things that were recorded in the book of Acts. With Jesus gone, Jesus' closest followers, his disciples, were wondering what to do with his incredible message and how to share it with the world. So they began traveling to different places and sharing the life-changing message of Jesus. In the passage that we're looking at today, we have 3 guys, Paul, Barnabas, and John Mark. Paul is one of the greatest Christian influencers of all time. He ended up writing more than half of what makes up the New Testament. And his friend Barnabas was a huge encouragement to those around him. In fact, that's why he was given the name Barnabas. It means encourager. Barnabas was also an important financial contributor to the biggest church of his day. And then finally, there's John Mark, who is Barnabas' cousin and the eventual writer of the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament. These guys, they were getting things done, but it wasn't always easy for them. Check this out. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they are doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them, but Paul did not think it wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. Paul and Barnabas were friends who were doing some pretty important work together. They were revealing Jesus to people and establishing churches along the way, but when they decided to go back and check on some of those churches, that's when the problem started. See, Barnabas wanted to bring John Mark, who apparently had ditched them the last time they went out on this kind of trip together. Because of that, Paul isn't so sure about bringing John Mark. He didn't like that he was stood up before, like who would? So why would he want to bring him along again? The fact that this story is included in our Bible is so important. It would have been so much easier if the writers had decided to make everyone look like a hero or just told the stuff that you were supposed to do or believe when it comes to your faith. But that's not what the Bible is. See, the Bible is a collection of stories about real people who had real disagreements and lived real tensions and were doing their best to get it right when it comes to following Jesus. Check out what happens next. They had such a sharp disagreement that they, Paul and Barnabas, parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left. Commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord, he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. Paul and Barnabas were 2 guys who understood the power of showing grace, overlooking offenses, and moving forward. They understood that things would be better if they could come to an agreement. So I'm assuming that they tried to work it out. If we can make peace, we need to try. But if we can't, we need to have boundaries. And that's what Paul and Barnabas did. They decided to go their separate ways. It was a disagreement between friends, a disagreement big enough that they decided that separating was the best thing to do. When we read this story, their disagreement may sound petty or small, but it was probably a big deal to them. When you think about it, any type of conflict is always a big deal when you're one of the people that's involved in it. In fact, maybe you've experienced something similar. Maybe a friendship was strained and people on the outside felt like it was an overreaction. But for you and that friend, it felt like a really big deal. You get that. What I love most about this story is that it doesn't end in conflict. The writer of Acts, Luke, goes on to say that the 2 men, Paul and Barnabas, they kept going in the important work that they were doing. They kept telling others about Jesus, even though they weren't doing it together anymore. Think about it. They could have let this conflict in their friendship stop them. They could have let it impact the work they knew they needed to do. They could have stopped talking about Jesus and started talking trash about each other. But they didn't. Both Paul and Barnabas continued their work of spreading the message of Jesus with new people, leading to doubling their efforts. Their friendship changed and ended, but they didn't let it end the mission that they shared. And here's what I think you and I can learn from them. See, being a friend means walking away friendly. What that means is you can experience a change in your friendship and still have a positive attitude about the other person. You can, like Paul and Barnabas, have a friendship-ending disagreement while still going on with your life in a way that doesn't impact you or the other person for the worse. It's possible. If you're faced with the end of a friendship, you have the choice to be friendly even if you're no longer friends. You can still treat them with respect when you're in the same place. You can speak well of them when their name comes up. You can move forward with your life just like they can move forward with their life. The story of your friendship, it might end, but neither of your stories has to end. You can move on and not let it ruin you or ruin your reputation by handling it poorly. That's what Paul and Barnabas showed us. So, how do we walk away friendly, even in the moments when you don't feel like it or think it's fair? Let's start with one simple word. You ready? Forgive. This one word, it's a really big deal. So if we're gonna choose to forgive, we can start this way. Identify why you're frustrated. Name your pain. Whether you're upset with them for making the choices that they're making, or you're upset that they're no longer talking to you and there's no reasonable explanation for it, or maybe things changed and it wasn't because of something anyone did, just figure out why you're upset. Don't try to figure out who's right and who's wrong, just identify why you're upset, then cancel their offense. That might look like letting go of what you think that they owe you, canceling the debt, softening your bitterness toward them and the circumstances. It's okay to be hurt or to feel hurt, but don't let your hurt get the final word. As God has forgiven you through Jesus, pass that on to them. Ask God to help you extend forgiveness to them. When God helps us forgive other people, we see more clearly how God has forgiven us. Forgiveness is a chance to see God at work. So forgive, then forgive again, then forgive again, then forgive again. Or if the friendship simply changed over time and no one was at fault, it may be realizing there's no offense to forgive so much as a change to come to terms with. Peter, another person who helped start the early church, said this: "Finally, all of you should be of one mind. Sympathize with each other. Love each other as brothers and sisters. Be tender-hearted and keep a humble attitude. Don't repay evil for evil. Don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing." You don't have to continue to be friends, but that doesn't mean that you have to become an enemy. You can pray for them. You can forgive them. Be kind to them, speak well of them, and you can even assume the best in them. Choose to be the one who takes the high road, even when it's difficult. This will be challenging, but the work is worth it. Being a friend, it means walking away friendly. It won't be easy, but the person who will benefit the most is actually you. Imagine the pain that you'll spare yourself by not holding grudges or starting wars or trying to get even with other people. Seasons, they change, people change, and friendships, they change too. Sometimes people simply go in separate directions, but you can do it in a way that doesn't devalue the friendship or the other person. When you head to small groups, think about your response to this question. What feelings come up when you think about changes to your friendships?
I hope that that was good for you and that you learned a lot. I pray that you continue to think about who is in your life for a season. And if they are seasonal, I pray that you transition out of that relationship with a heart that is full of forgiveness and with a heart that is full of love. I hope that you have a great week.